I'd been camping my whole life, mostly with friends or my brother. But that October, I decided to go alone. It was supposed to be my reset. The kind of quiet only cold wind, running water, and pine trees can give. I picked a small hidden campground near Clearwater River, a place so remote, the GPS signal died miles before the road ended. It was the kind of spot where you could scream and no one would hear you. At first, that felt comforting. The drive there was beautiful gold leaves, empty highways, the smell of wet dirt after morning rain. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was setting behind the trees, leaving streaks of orange light through the fog. I remember stepping out of the car and feeling like the forest was watching me arrive, but I laughed it off. City brain, too many horror podcasts. I set up my tent near the riverbank, built a small fire, and cooked dinner from a can. The sound of the current brushing over the rocks was oddly hypnotic. The only other noise was the occasional splash fish, or maybe the water shifting. When you're alone in the woods, even small sounds feel personal. Every crackle of a twig feels like a question directed at you. By midnight, the fire had burned low. The air was sharp and cold, and a low mist crept across the water. I crawled into my sleeping bag and let the silence pull me towards sleep. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper. It was so soft I thought it was part of my dream at first, but it came again, low, gentle, almost like a breath carried on the wind. I sat up, heart hammering, and listened. The whisper didn't come from the river. It came from behind my tent. I froze. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. My flashlight was beside me, but turning it on felt dangerous, like whatever was out there was waiting for me to acknowledge it. For nearly a minute, I just listened. Then nothing. Only water, wind, and the distant creak of trees. I told myself it was the wind caught in the branches, maybe my imagination filling the silence. I lay back down and forced my eyes shut, but a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was clearer, closer, and it said my name. My blood turned cold. I sat up so fast, the sleeping bag tangled around my legs. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. No reply, just the soft hiss of the river. I unzipped the tent and aimed my flashlight toward the trees, the beam cutting through fog and darkness. Nothing, just white mist and shadows. But then I saw footprints in the mud, heavy boot-shaped footprints leading up to my tent, then circling it. They weren't there before. I stepped out slowly, scanning the woods, every hair on my neck standing up. The silence was unreal. Even the river seemed quieter, like the forest was holding its breath with me. And then, out of nowhere, the whisper came again, from deep in the trees. This time it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, urgent. It said my name twice. I ran back inside the tent and zipped it up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grab my knife. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the zipper, waiting for it to move. At some point, exhaustion took over. I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was sunlight filtering through the tent walls. For a second, I thought it was all a dream, until I unzipped the tent and saw the footprints again. This time deeper, fresher, leading away from my campsite and disappearing into the woods. I should have packed up right then, but curiosity, that stupid, dangerous curiosity, whispered louder than fear. I followed the tracks. They wound between the trees for nearly 20 minutes, until they reached a small slope that dropped down toward the river. And there, on the other side of the water, stood a figure. He was facing me, motionless. A tall man, wearing what looked like an old ranger coat. His face was lost in shadow. For a moment, I thought maybe he was a park ranger, checking the area. "Hey," I called out. "Did you come by my tent last night?" He didn't respond. He didn't even move. I blinked, and he was gone. Just gone. 1 second he was there, the next only fog and trees. I backed away slowly, every instinct in me screaming to leave. The rest of the day was a blur. I stayed near my car, kept the fire big, tried to convince myself it was some hiker playing tricks. But when darkness came again, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire, clutching my flashlight, listening. Around 2 a.m., it started again, that whisper. Except this time, it wasn't across the river. It was right behind me. I turned, shining the light toward the sound, and for a split second, I saw him, standing just beyond the glow, face pale, eyes black as the river at night. His lips moved, whispering my name over and over, each time more distorted. I dropped the light. By the time I picked it back up, he was gone. That's when I realized the whisper wasn't coming from his mouth. It was coming from the water. Ripples moved toward the shore, as if something unseen had just stepped in. The whisper rose again, dozens of voices this time, all tangled together. I grabbed my bag and ran through mud, branches, and fog until I saw the outline of my car. When I looked back, I saw him again, standing knee-deep in the river, watching me leave. I didn't stop driving until sunrise. A few weeks later, I tried to find Clearwater River again, to prove to myself it was real. But no map showed a camping spot by that name. No ranger station had ever listed it, and that's when it hit Mide. Never seen a sign that said Clearwater River. The old forum post where I found it was gone, deleted. Still, sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I swear I hear the same whisper. It starts soft, like wind through water, and then I hear my name. Just once. Just enough to make me remember that night by the river, and wonder if the forest still remembers me too. 2 years ago, my cousin and I decided to take a quiet weekend camping trip in northern Oregon. We'd both been exhausted, burned out from work, and needed a break from everything. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, no phones, no people, just us and the sound of nature. We picked a place called Haven Ridge, a lakeside spot about 3 miles off a dirt road that we'd found through a Reddit post. Someone described it as untouched, hidden, the kind of place where you'd never see another soul. That sounded perfect. We should have realized that's never a good thing. The first day was peaceful. The lake looked like glass. The trees were tall enough to block the wind, and for the first time in months, I felt calm. We spent the day fishing, telling stories, laughing about dumb things from high school. That night, we built a fire and stayed up late watching the flames fade into embers. By the time we crawled into our tents, the sky was ink black and silent. No cars, no crickets, just quiet. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up. At first I didn't know why. But then I heard it, the crunch of leaves, slow, heavy, like someone walking in a careful rhythm just outside the tent. I froze, listening. It wasn't an animal. The steps were too controlled, too deliberate. My cousin whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I nodded, barely breathing. Then a voice came from the darkness, low and rough. "You boys got a light?" My cousin looked at me, eyes wide. I didn't answer. The voice spoke again, closer this time. "You boys got a light?" Same words, same tone. It didn't sound like a question anymore. It sounded like someone testing us. I cleared my throat and said, "We're good, man." Silence followed. Then the sound of laughter, quiet and breathy. Just one short exhale, and then nothing. The footsteps faded away. We waited until dawn to go outside. There were no other tents, no tire marks, no signs of anyone else nearby, but there were footprints, large and deep, leading from the trees right up to our campsite, before stopping beside the tent and disappearing back into the forest. No lantern, no flashlight marks, just footprints. We told ourselves it was probably some lost hiker who needed help, but deep down we both knew it didn't feel right. Still, we stayed another night. Stupid, I know. We made the fire bigger that evening and sat closer to it, trying to joke about what happened, pretending we weren't both looking over our shoulders every 5 seconds. Around midnight, we heard it again. Footsteps, slow and steady, echoing from across the lake. I shined my flashlight toward the sound and froze. There was a man standing on the opposite shore. I could barely see him through the mist, but he was tall, thin, completely still. "Hey," I called. No response. Then the same voice drifted across the water. "You boys got a light?" I turned to my cousin, and the look on his face said everything. The man didn't move. He didn't call out again. He just stood there watching us. What made it worse, he didn't have a flashlight, no lantern, no phone light, yet I could see him perfectly outlined like the moonlight was bending around him. Then he turned and walked into the trees, but the sound didn't come from across the water. It came from behind us. We stayed up the rest of the night, gripping the hatchet, whispering prayers we hadn't said in years. When the first light of morning touched the water, we decided to pack up. As we were rolling the tents, my cousin noticed something on a log near the edge of the lake. It was a Polaroid photo. He picked it up, and his hands started shaking. It was you sitting by the fire from the night before, taken from across the water. Neither of us took it. Neither of us even owned a camera. We dropped everything and started down the trail. Halfway back, I saw something nailed to a tree, a second Polaroid. The same photo, only this one had something written on the back in smeared ink. It said, "Thanks for the light." We ran the rest of the way to the car. When we reached town, we went straight to the sheriff's office. The deputy listened quietly as we told the story, but he didn't seem surprised. He said campers had gone missing up near Haven Ridge before, always near the lake. People talked about a man who walked the woods at night, asking for a light. The locals said he was a ranger who'd disappeared years ago after getting lost during a storm. His name was Harold Kent. A few weeks later, I saw his missing person flyer on a bulletin board outside a diner. The photo showed a smiling man in a ranger's coat, holding a flashlight that wasn't turned on. I stared at that picture for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just coincidence. But a month after the trip, my cousin got a small package in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just his name. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, the same one, us by the fire. On the back, written in the same shaky handwriting, were the words, "You boys got a light." That was the last time either of us went camping. Even now, when I walk outside at night and the air smells like pine, I feel that same cold air from the lake on my neck. Sometimes I think I hear footsteps behind me, soft, measured, like someone walking carefully, staying just out of sight. I tell myself it's nothing, but part of me knows better. Whoever that man was, he's still out there somewhere in the dark, asking the same question. And maybe, if you're ever near Haven Ridge, and you hear it too, don't answer him, because if you do, you'll give him exactly what he's looking for. Last spring, I decided to take a solo camping trip into the Smoky Mountains. I'd been through a rough breakup. My job was draining me, and every sound of the city made me feel like I was suffocating. I just wanted silence, the kind of silence that makes you forget the world exists. I found a small unlisted campsite on an old hiking forum. The post mentioned an abandoned ranger cabin nearby, deep in the woods. No coordinates, no photos, just a vague description that said, "Follow the stream until you hear the wind stop." It sounded poetic, almost eerie, and I was stupid enough to think it sounded peaceful. By the time I got there, the sun was bleeding orange through thick clouds. I parked near the tree line and hiked down until I found a small clearing beside a narrow stream. The air smelled like pine and rain, and the forest floor was soft beneath my boots. I pitched my tent, built a fire, and cooked noodles from a can. Everything felt calm, almost too calm. Not a single bird called. No insects buzzed. It was the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums until you start to hear your own heartbeat. That night, I sat by the fire watching the mist rise from the stream. I was just about to crawl into my tent when I heard a faint humming. At first I thought it was the wind moving through hollow branches, but it had rhythm, like someone softly humming an old song. I stood up, listening. It came from across the stream, deep in the trees. The fire flickered, and for a second, it almost sounded like the humming stopped when I moved. I called out, "Hello." My voice echoed off the water. Silence. Then, after a long pause, a man's voice answered, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't shouted, not even angry, just calm, steady, and close enough to sound wrong. I spun around with my flashlight, shining it across the stream. Nothing, just fog, curling around the trees. I waited for a reply, but there was only the crackle of the fire and my own breathing. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. The woods can make you hear things that aren't there. Eventually, I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and told myself to sleep. But the humming came back, softer this time, right outside the tent. I could hear someone's breath between the notes. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I wanted to yell, but I couldn't make a sound. The humming circled the tent once, slow and deliberate, then faded away into the distance. I didn't sleep after that. I just stared at the ceiling of the tent and waited for the sun. When daylight finally broke, I unzipped the tent and saw muddy footprints beside the stream. Bare feet. They crossed the water and stopped right next to where I'd slept. I should have left. Any sane person would have, but curiosity is dangerous in the woods. I followed the prints upstream for nearly 30 minutes until I saw it a cabin, crooked and half collapsed, swallowed by vines. The windows were black, the door hanging by one hinge, and carved above the doorway, deep into the wood, were 3 words: "Do not enter." There was a faint curl of smoke rising from the chimney. I don't know why, but I walked closer. Maybe I wanted proof that someone was living out here. Maybe I needed to see it wasn't all in my head. The door groaned when I pushed it open. The smell inside hit me immediately: mold, rust, and something sharp like iron or old blood. The air was cold, heavy. The first thing I saw was a table covered in dust, a cracked lantern, and a wall full of Polaroid photos. Dozens of them, all pinned in uneven rows. Every photo showed people standing in front of the same cabin, some smiling, some waving, all looking straight into the camera. Then my stomach dropped. The most recent photo was of me, standing by my tent the night before. My posture, my clothes, everything exactly as I'd been when I ate by the fire. Taken from across the stream. The handwriting on the bottom said, "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled backward, bumping into the table. Something moved in the corner of the cabin, a soft creak of a floorboard, slow breathing. I turned toward the sound, but the room was empty. That was enough. I bolted through the door and ran. The woods seemed to close in around me. I didn't recognize the trail anymore. Every direction looked the same. I ran downhill, tripping over roots, scraping my arms on branches, until I reached the stream again. I followed it, hoping it would lead me back, but the air was wrong. The forest didn't sound like it did before. No birds, no water, just that low, steady humming again. It wasn't coming from behind me this time. It was coming from everywhere. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder, closer, until I could hear words between the hums. My name, whispered in that same calm voice. I turned and saw movement in the trees, a shadow, taller than any man, standing completely still. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. My lungs burned, my legs felt heavy, but I didn't stop until I saw the faint silver shape of my car through the trees. I didn't look back, not once. I threw my bag in the passenger seat and drove, gravel spraying behind the tires. When I finally reached the highway, I pulled over and tried to breathe. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely grip the wheel. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the road, listening to the sound of the engine, the only thing reminding me I was still alive. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? Weeks later, I went online to find that hiking post again. The one about the cabin. It was gone. The whole thread deleted. The user who posted it no longer existed. A few months after that, I drove back through that part of the mountains. Not to hike, just to see it from the road. But where the dirt trail used to begin, there was nothing, no sign, no path, just trees. And nailed to one of them was an old wooden board with 3 words carved into it: "Do not enter." That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard humming outside my apartment window. It was low, slow, the same rhythm as before. I pulled the curtains back and saw nothing, just the faint reflection of my own face. Then I noticed it, a handprint, muddy smeared across the glass from the outside. My stomach twisted. The humming stopped, and from somewhere down the street, I heard that voice again, calm and steady, just like before. You shouldn't be here. I haven't gone camping since, but sometimes, when everything is quiet, I swear I can still hear that same humming, faint and distant, like it's waiting for me to listen. And every time it starts, I remember the wall of Polaroids inside that cabin, and I wonder how many more are hanging there, knowing if one of them is of me, standing at my own window.